Well, good morning, everyone. It's been a while since I got back from Montenegro, so this week while I was preparing, I wrote out day by day what we were doing while we were in Montenegro. And this morning, while my dad was printing the notes, he said, "Clayton, this is a lot of notes. Are you going to be able to get through all this?" And I said, "Well, we did so much that the only way that I could remember what we did was to actually go day by day and type out what we ended up doing." So I probably won't get through all of it, but I'm going to do the best I can and at least cover the highlights and some of the takeaways, some of the things that I learned while I was in Montenegro. So before I start, I'll give you a little bit of background on how I found out about the trip and how I ended up going on the trip. So over the past few years, I've been involved with a college ministry at Shades Mountain Independent Church. This church is in Hoover, and several of you may know some families that go to this church. But I've been going to Bible study with them on Tuesday nights for a while, and over the past couple of years during the summer, they've gone on a mission trip. And for the 2 previous years before 2012, they went to Montenegro, and they were doing a little bit different ministry there than what we ended up doing this year. Basically, in the city of Nikšić, I think I said that right, they were doing a kids camp where they weren't necessarily focused on discipleship, which is what we focused on this trip, but they were more focused on trying to minister to the kids in the community of Nikšić rather than within the church body. This year was a little bit different. They wanted to focus on discipleship specifically with the teenagers within the church because many of them have a hard time being in a country where the population is roughly 625,000, and there's only, to my knowledge, and Pastor Vladimir, there's only 2 Christian churches. So it's really tough to be a teenager in a country like that and not have many Christian friends around you to be with and to share the things that you're learning within the church. And so that was kind of our goal going into this trip, was to minister to those, specifically the teenagers. But as we were going in, we didn't really have a clear plan. Now that may sound a little off when you're going into another country and you don't have a plan, but it ended up working out well. The reason we didn't have a plan is because the culture in Montenegro and the people are very relaxed. They don't like to be pressured into doing anything that's, that they don't know what's going to happen, or they don't like structure. That sounds bad, but that's the way they are in their culture. They don't like having a set plan. Well, you're doing this, you end at this time, and you only have this much time. So that's the reason we weren't very structured, I guess, with our planning. But when we finally got there, after several flights, we flew from Birmingham to Detroit to London to Croatia. We stayed with a missionary family in Croatia for a day, and who were also missionaries at SMI. And we got to stay in their house in Zagreb. And then we flew from Zagreb to Dubrovnik, and then finally Pastor Vladimir picked us up and drove us into Montenegro. I thought I didn't know what kind of transportation we were going to have in Montenegro. Ended up being in a Mercedes. It's kind of nice. Not really. It was a Mercedes Sprinter. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that, but it's a giant van. Not very comfortable at all. So we were not riding in style by any means. So we arrived on Saturday night, and we were pretty tired at this point. So we didn't do much on Saturday. We kind of just talked about the plan for the week, and then we got up on Sunday morning. Their church meets on Sunday night, so we didn't actually do anything at church until that evening. But Sunday morning, Violetta, she's about my age, and she's kind of like in charge of the teenagers over there. So she kind of runs like all of the children and the teenagers, and kind of works with the ministry in that part in the church. So she was kind of working with Scott and Anne Marie. They are the ones who lead the college ministry at SMI. Those two were working together to kind of like orchestrate the plan for the week and everything like that. So we arrived on Sunday morning, and that morning they drove us up to one of the tallest mountains in Montenegro, and we sat there, we spent some time in the Word, and we spent some time praying and talking about what the plan for the week would be. So we didn't know this going into the trip, but we ended up working a couple of days with kids. I thought the whole time we were going to be working with the older youth within the church, but we actually wanted to do, or Violetta wanted us to work with kids for a couple of days. So there were really 3 different main things that we did while we were in Montenegro. First of all, we had a kids retreat with the kids within the church, not the ones within the community. So we worked with them for a couple of days, and then after that we worked with the teenagers. We were kind of having like a youth retreat with them, and we did several things I'll talk about here in a minute. And then after that we had a church retreat where we actually met with some of the older people within the church and kind of shared our testimonies and kind of worshiped with them in that way. So on Monday morning, the first thing we did was we ran the kids camp. The kids camp wasn't all day long, but it was probably 4.5 hours, something like that. So we worked with them in the mornings. We did some arts and crafts and stuff like that. We also did game time. And the thing about the kids within the church is that most of them did not speak English, but most of the teenagers did. So the older youth were able to communicate with us pretty well, but the younger ones were not. So there was a language barrier with the very young ones and then the older ones as well within the church. Most of them didn't have English or didn't know English very well. So it was kind of interesting that the teenagers were the ones that were translating for us. So while we were doing kids camp on Monday and Tuesday, we had the art time, and then we did the story time, which is basically where we incorporated a Bible story with the story time. So it was a little difficult having to have all of it translated so that the younger ones could understand. But it ended up being really cool to see that while we were sharing in English and and then the teenagers were sharing again in Serbian, which is the language that they use in Montenegro. So for the first 2 days we worked with kids. It was a lot of fun. I've never worked with any young kids like that, but it was cool to see how responsive they were to the Word and to the things that we had to share with them, even though we were speaking in a different language. So even though that the message was coming in or was being translated, they were very responsive, and that was a blessing to me and the others that we were with. So Monday and Tuesday we worked with kids, and that was really cool. So we finished working with the kids probably about 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we went and had lunch, and then in the afternoons we would spend time with the teenagers. And I remember on Monday afternoon, which was kind of the first day that we spent with the teenagers, they were the ones that could speak English, so they had a lot of questions for us. They were asking us things like, what is life like in America? Is it easy being a Christian in America? And that was a difficult question for me to respond to. I didn't know how to answer it first, because I guess the culture over there, they don't really have a negative perception on Christians, but they kind of avoid them. The Christians over there, and there's only 2 churches, so there's not a whole lot of Christians over the country. They're kind of the outcast. I mean, they're not negatively looked upon, but they're kind of ignored. So it's rough for the teenagers over there, and that was it was hard for me to answer some of the questions that they were asking about whether or not it was easy being a Christian in America. And I'll talk about that here in just a minute. So on Tuesday, we spent some time with the teenagers at the river, and we also had some time for devotion in the afternoon, and also to share our testimonies, because a lot of them wanted to hear, not only about church, but also how we were saved and how similar it was for them, being in different countries. So we spent some time with the teenagers in the afternoon, and then worked with kids in the morning. Wednesday, we spent all day with the teenagers. Pastor Vladimir took us to the beach in Montenegro, which is, by the way, beautiful. I had no idea what to expect as far as like the land and the world around us in Montenegro. I didn't know what to expect, because I knew it was on a different side of the world that I had ever been to. But it was beautiful. The mountain ranges over there are just nothing like we have here. I went on a road trip not too long ago out west to Grand Canyon, saw some great sights, but what they have over there is just nothing in comparison to what we have over here. And they're they realize that being Christians, and they realize that how blessed they are to have God's beauty all around them. So we spent some time with them on Wednesday at the beach, and their beaches over there it's beautiful, but there's no sand, so it's just all rocks. So they were running around. We brought them an American football, so that give them something American. And they were wanting to like run around and play with it, and I'm like, this is just not going to work here with all these rocks. But I put sandals on, and it ended up being fine. So anyways, we brought a tent out on the beach, and nobody else had tents on the beach. There was a lot of people out there with us, but most of them just had umbrellas like you would see normally at the beach here. We had a giant tent, and it was really cool because we had a lot of people looking at us like, what are these guys doing? What are they doing? So what we did when we all got there is we all gathered in a big circle, and we first spent some time in prayer, and then secondly, we some of the older people who went from America, Nash and Reese, there were two people from SMI that went with us. They were sharing their testimonies, and it really hit some of the younger ones that were with us. And it was just awesome to see how they were able to talk with Nash and Reese. And Nash, he's an artist, so a lot of the people in Montenegro are very artistic. That's just something that they learn in their culture. So after we had time to share testimonies with some of the kids, we also had time where he was able to take like drawings. He does like cartoon drawings of several of the. He started off drawing us, like some of us, but after a while it became to where like other people from the beach would come up to us, and he was able to draw them as well. So it ended up being an awesome opportunity to have this tent here. People were already paying attention to us, but now they were coming up to us, wanting Nash to draw them as well, and it was great because we were able to talk with them and actually share the gospel with a few of them. And it just ended up being a real blessing that day at the beach. And some of their questions, again, just really made you think. And it was challenging for me. And going into this trip, I really didn't know what to expect because I'd never been on a mission trip like this. I didn't know how well they were going to get along with us, how well we were going to interact, but it ended up being great. So we came back from the beach on Wednesday night, and we had prayer service that night at church. And I'll show you a picture right here in a minute of the actual church, but it's actually pretty amazing how similar our service here is to the service that they had in Montenegro. Like when I walked in, I felt like I was here. And I mean that in a way that, like, the way that they did the service, the way that it was ran was so similar to the way that it is here. It was just amazing. So their building is in the middle of downtown Podgorica, which is the biggest city in Montenegro. And you drive back through some alleyways. It's kind of sketchy, but you finally arrive at this building. And from the outside, it doesn't look very flattering. But when you do go inside, it's probably about the size of this room, and it was just really cool. So we spent Wednesday night. We had a prayer night. All the people from the church came. We ended up spending about 3 hours praying. That's a long time, but it was amazing because we were sitting there, and some of the older people, they didn't speak English, but it was just as powerful and moving to hear them pray in another language, which I couldn't understand, but it was powerful. You could tell that God was there with us in that room, and He was ministering through prayer that night. It was a great experience. On Thursday, we drove into the mountains. Pastor Vladimir wanted to take us to one of his friend's cabin, and so we spent the day about 2 hours driving into the mountains. And Montenegro is not a very big country. I'll show you a picture on the map here in a minute. So during the span of the week that I was there, there was probably only 2 cities that we didn't go to. We spent a lot of time in that van. and it was very warm while we were there. It was probably about 105 degrees every day. And of course, no AC, nothing like that. So we spent about 2 hours driving into the mountains. And once we got there, we didn't know this, but there was going to be some other people staying with us. They were staying at the cabin with us. So that night, the Montenegrins wanted to have Montenegro night. They wanted to let us have an experience with their culture. So what they did was that they cooked us some food. I have no idea what it was, but it was good. And they did some of their songs in Serbian, some of their hymns. So we could recognize the tune, but we didn't know the words, obviously. And they did some other cool stuff. They did some Montenegro skits, which were pretty funny. And then after that, we spent some time in worship and singing. And it was awesome because there was people at the cabins that were staying with us who were, at the table close by eating dinner while we were there singing hymns and praise songs. And they were just watching us the whole time. And it was just cool to be in a position where you could be worshiping God in another country with people that don't often get to interact with other believers, and be able to have people outside of the church that was with us see that as well and see how we were worshiping God. So it was an awesome experience being in the mountains. Again, beautiful. It's the mountain range that we were in was close to the second biggest canyon in the world, except for the Grand Canyon. So it was cool. Their mountain ranges over there are beautiful, and I'll show you some pictures here in a minute. On Friday, we spent most of the day driving back. It took a while to get up there, so it took a while to get back. Anyways, on Friday, we also stopped at a huge lake with this just giant mountain in the background and this huge zip line that went all the way across the lake there. We wanted to do it, but we didn't have any money, so we didn't. People in the Montenegro, they don't have a lot of money, but for those types of activities, they like to charge a lot of money, especially if they see that you're American. So anyways, I'll show you a picture of the zip line here in a minute. So Friday, we drove back. Saturday was the day that we did a church retreat. So we spent some time with the people from the church, and at this point, most of the teenagers did not come with us on Saturday. And the reason this is because some of the teenagers in the church didn't have Christian parents. So a lot of their parents by this point, they were a little aggravated that they were spending every day with us at church, and they just didn't understand. So some of the teenagers went back home on Saturday, spent some time with their family, but the older members of the church were able to come with us and spend some time with us on Saturday. So we went to a different beach in Montenegro, which is on the Adriatic Sea, right across from Italy, for those of y'all who want a picture of where it is on the map. So we spent some time at the beach, and it took about 3 hours of going down this huge mountain, bumpiest ride I've ever had in my life. I've never been car sick, but I was close. It took a while to get there. But once we got there, Pastor Vladimir had a lesson that he wanted to share with us, and he ended up sharing this lesson in Montenegrin, in their language. So all the Americans there, we didn't know exactly what he was saying, but it was cool to be there, while someone else is sharing, even in a language that you didn't understand. And then afterwards, we were able to kind of talk and pray in English. So it was just cool to spend some time with the older members of the church, and they also wanted to hear some of our testimonies, so we were able to share with them some of our testimonies as well. The next day, Sunday, this was day 8 in Montenegro. This was kind of wrap-up day. It was the day before we were heading out. Saturday morning, we were actually going to go to the other church in Montenegro, which was about 2 hours away. So we ended up driving there, but once we got there, they didn't have enough room. They just simply didn't have enough room for all of us to attend the service there that morning. So Violetta the one that manages the college ministry over there, ended up going to the service while we kind of just waited for her. So what we did while we waited is we went to the coast and we sat down on the beach and kind of had our own service there. So although we didn't get to see the other church there in Montenegro, we did get to attend service that morning. And then that night we attended service once again. Scott Levier taught that night, and it was cool again to be just with that church. And the worship over there, it's so similar to the way we do it here, but they really get into it over there. They're very when they're singing, they're not dancing, but they really get into it, and they sing a lot. They sing for about an hour. Their service is split into two main parts. The first part is about an hour and a half long. They first start out, spend some time in prayer, and then they sing for about an hour. And then they have like a 30-minute break where some people just come to the second part of the service. So some people show up midway through. And then the second part of the service is obviously the preaching time, which lasts for about an hour and a half or so. So their church is very similar to the way we do things here, although they do meet a little bit longer than we do. But it was just amazing. I think I got more out of this trip than I was able to put in, for sure. And I think that's a lot of the time what you end up doing when you go to another country. It's just because you don't know what to expect from the people, and you don't know what God has to teach you, that you end up learning more than you're able to teach them. And it was just awesome spending time in Montenegro, and we just had an awesome time. The seven of us went from SMI and from some surrounding churches, and we just had a great time at the three different retreats that we did. I have three kind of main takeaways, and I'll show you the slideshow. And these are pretty basic, but there's some things that really hit me and some things that I really learned from this trip. One, time is precious. We only have a limited amount of time here on earth, and we need to be using this time to prepare for eternity. The Bible cautions us in Ephesians 5:15-16. I'm sure y'all are familiar with this verse. Look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Technology makes it painfully easy for us to waste time. Facebook, Netflix, Xbox, whatever, just sports. Time can be wasted so easily here, and it was so refreshing for me to be in Montenegro, where my cell phone didn't work, where I didn't have a computer, where I didn't have any of these technical, I guess, entertainment devices that I have while I'm over here. And it was just great to be able to wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do is grab my Bible instead of my phone. So it was awesome to have some time away from technology, and I think that we should be more careful on how we use our time, because a lot of it can go wasted. And I'm the worst offender when it comes to wasting time. I spend time doing things when I should be in the Word or I should be praying, and that's one thing that I have been a lot better at since I got back from Montenegro. The other thing is that relationships are important. The Montenegrin culture, I guess, taught me a lot about relationships. And what I mean by this is the culture over there, when you meet someone, they don't assume that you are there to, I guess, hurt them, or there for some kind of negative influence or something like that. They automatically assume that you are a friendly person and want to help. And in America, it's basically the opposite. When you meet someone, they automatically assume that you're there to either try to take their money or try to make them have a bad day. And it was kind of striking, even me, in Montenegro, where I couldn't communicate great with the culture over there. When I was able to talk with people from the city, they automatically assumed that I was friendly and that I wanted to help them in some way. Not because I was American, not because I probably had money, but just that's their culture over there. They're very relationship based, and that's one of the main reasons we wanted to minister and to the teenagers over there is because of how they are so relationship based. So that's the second thing that I really took away. And the third thing, and probably the most important thing, is that genuine Christianity is not popular. While we were in Montenegro, a lot of the questions I was talking about were very hard for me to answer. I guess one of the hardest questions was, is it easy being a Christian in America? And on the surface, that seems like a very easy question to answer compared to how they are in their culture. Yes, it's easier being a Christian in America because you don't have people around you looking not down on you, but looking at you differently and kind of ignoring you. But really, should it be easier being a Christian in America? And that was the thing that I had to think about the most. And if we look at Matthew 7, 13, and 14, and the Sermon on the Mount, it says, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow, and the way is hard that leads to life, and for those who find it are few." And it really struck me how some of the Montenegrins were asking about Christian life in America. Being a Christian should not be popular, and being a Christian should not be easy. And I know this is a bad analogy, but I was thinking about how what's the guy in the Alabama weight room? What's the screams all the time?
Why am I getting looked at?
Scott Cochran.
Yes.
Okay, yes, him. I've seen several quotes by him, and he's always saying something like, "If it's not hard, you're not doing it right." And although I don't think genuine Christianity should be hard, but I think it should be challenging, and I don't think that it should be easy. So when I was answering that question, it was hard for me because it's easier because the culture doesn't really look down on you or look at you in a negative way. But genuine Christianity, not the ones who go to church every day or go to church every week just to be with their friends, is unpopular and is difficult. And we can see that in Matthew. So I had a wonderful trip, and that is just the surface of what we did. We were able to spend time with the teenagers, with the younger kids, and with the older people in the church. And it was just all in all a great trip. So I have a few pictures here that I will show you, and then I will let some of the other men share some things. Here is Montenegro right here, formerly Yugoslavia. So that's where it is on the map, and you can see how small it is. So that's why we were able to spend a lot of time in the different mountain ranges and stuff like that. So Podgorica is where we were. That's what the star is. So this is basically the whole team that we had, plus Violetta. So from left to right, we have Jack, Nash, me, Tyler, Violetta, Anne Marie, Scott, and Reese. I'm sure you won't remember their names. That's fine. This is Scott and Anne Marie. They're the ones who kind of manage the college ministry at SMI. And I'll try to stand where y'all can see. But they're the ones who, or Scott is the one that leads the Bible study that I go to on Tuesday nights, and he was the one that kind of told me about the trip. And Anne Marie cooks for us on Tuesday night. She's excellent. This is Anne Marie and Violetta. We bought her some Alabama gear. She was very thankful for that. And it was kind of funny. A lot of the teenagers over there already had like Alabama shirts and stuff from like the previous years that they had mission trips over there. So Violetta is the one that kind of managed the ministry over there for the youth. This is a picture from Croatia at one of the missionaries' houses there. I can't recall his name off the top of my head. We spent like 6 hours there. We basically went there, slept, and then got on another plane. But this is the picture from their porch, looking into Zagreb. This is flying into Dubrovnik, Croatia, And then from this point we drove into Montenegro. And when I saw this, I felt like I was in the Bahamas or something. I didn't know exactly what to think because I hadn't quite got there yet. But this is just an example of just how beautiful it is over there. There we go. This is Pastor Vladimir in the middle. He's about my height, so he's awesome. This is Scott Levier over here, and then on the right over here is Nash. He's the one that is the artist and was doing the cartoon drawings. Cool guy. And this is our Mercedes in the background. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. This is when we were driving into Nixie. And this is a picture of driving into Pakrica. And it's pretty much like this everywhere until you actually get into the city. And this is their church. This is inside the building. They do have projector and stuff like that. And this is for the first part of the service when we were singing. So just their building, it just looks so similar to ours once you walk in. And I thought that was just so cool. This is another picture of Scott teaching that night, and this is Miriam. She is the pastor Vladimir's wife. She was translating for everyone. And this is a picture of the kids that we were working with on Monday and Tuesday. And this, you can tell these are some of the younger kids, so that's why we were working with them separately. And where we were spending time with the teenagers. And it was cool because we had the teenagers were actually with us while we were, it actually helped us while we were preparing for like the Bible story. And they were the ones that obviously had to translate for all of the younger kids. So this is a group of the kids that we were working with. And they were a happy bunch of kids. Now this is Nash. He was doing his drawing. This was actually a real drawing that he was doing, but he had been doing like cartoon drawings. But he's a very talented artist, and he was able to use that while we were in Montenegro to share the gospel. And here's another picture of the beach that we went to. And you can just see how beautiful it is. So another picture of while we were going into the mountains, heading towards the cabin. And a picture of the mountain ranges there. This is the lake that we stopped at, and right there in front of the lake is where we had kind of a devotion time. We sat in a big circle, and we had people all over the place looking at us, and it was really cool. But you can just see how beautiful again the landscape is there. Here's the zip line. I thought I'd throw this picture in there for those who wanted to know. We didn't end up getting to ride it, but it looks fun. This is while we were going into the cabin. This is basically the side of the road. The roads over there are very sketchy. I would not want to be the one driving if I was over there. They're basically all on the side of the cliff. There's no, besides like the main highways and stuff, there's no set roads or anything. Well, I mean, there's set roads, but no like guide rails or anything. This is the cabin that we stayed at. And it was a pretty nice cabin. The owners of it actually knew some of the girls that were in the church, so they ended up giving us a great deal of staying there. This is Montenegrin night. The teenagers wanted to, like I was saying, spend some time having us experience their culture. So this is when they were doing some skits. This is when we were all sitting around singing and sharing some testimonies and stuff like that. That's one of the major things that happened while we were there. Saturday night, Montenegro was competing for an Olympic medal. This was their first opportunity to try to win an Olympic medal ever. And so what we did on Saturday night after the church retreat is we actually went into the city and watched on this giant projector in the middle of the city the country of Montenegro compete for an Olympic medal, a gold medal, in women's handball. I didn't know that was a sport, but it sounds cool. They ended up losing, but it was all good. They're very they love their country, so all of them had flags. They were running around, throwing fireworks in random directions. Sometimes I would look down and I would see a firework on the ground in front of me. I kind of just kicked it away. This is on Sunday as we were preparing to leave. This is the church, the second church in Montenegro is down there somewhere, but again, we weren't able to go that morning because they just didn't have room for us. I took this picture because this is one of the famous, I guess, islands in Montenegro. That whole island right there is a hotel, basically. And some rich guy owns it or something. But it's where all the rich people stay when they visit Montenegro, I guess. And this is as we were leaving on Sunday. And this was the last picture, I think, in the slideshow. This is, we played Uno, and we introduced them to, I think, Phase 10 was the other game that we played. While we were just spending time with them after church that night. So that's the end. So it was a great trip. I want to thank the church, for supporting me on the trip. And so it was a great trip, and I guess I'll end in prayer because I would like to pray for the church over there. So if you would just bow with me in prayer now. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing me to go on this trip. It was just a blessing for me and for all the other Americans that were able to go. I pray for the church in Montenegro right now. I pray that you would allow them to grow. I would pray for the hearts of the people in the church. I pray that you would minister to them through what we were able to do and through what you are continually doing in Montenegro. I also pray for the people in Montenegro that are not Christians. I pray that you would use that church to minister to them. Allow your word to get into the hearts of the people around the church. And we pray that you would just work your mighty hand in the country of Montenegro. Thank you again, Father, for allowing me to go. And thank you for allowing me to share with the church today. In your name I pray. Amen.
What are the people? Are they atheists or what? Why
Orthodox, so government religion basically is the main religion over there. But most people just don't care.
Really?
What sort of evangelistic outreach does the church have in the local area? The one that you spent the most time with. I mean, do they have any organized outreach?
They do, and Camp Monte was what the church did 2 years previous to this year. They did not do Camp Monte this year for several reasons that I won't get into. But that's one of their main outreach for its evangelistic type of activities, and they do that during the summer, and also they have one in like December or something like that. That's one for the kids at least. I don't know of other organized evangelistic activities that specific church has. But I do know that they work with the community a good bit and try to put themselves out there and share the gospel when they can.
Do you have any idea how many evangelical Christians there are in the country?
Not many. I mean, I know there are some that are not within the two churches that at least Pastor Vladimir knows about, but if I had to guess, it would probably be 150 or so.
When you say two churches, did you mean in that city or the whole country?
The whole country.
That must not be very big if you drive.
Right, yeah, there's only about 625,000-ish people that live in the country of Montenegro, and I mean, it's pretty small. You can drive from border to border in probably 3 hours.
How long? I mean, I've never heard of it. I've heard of Yugoslavia. Has it been Montenegro for a long time?
They became a country in 2006, so it's the third newest country right now.
I guess from a political standpoint, why did they form a new country? I mean, what was wrong with Yugoslavia?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
During the testimony time, were you ever privy to hear any of the local people's testimonies, such as the late friend, the
They,
younger girl?
right. During the time where we were sharing the testimonies, they didn't really share with us. But we spent so much time in the van talking with the teenagers that during that time I was able to ask, like, would you share with me your testimony? And I did hear some of the testimonies of some of the teenagers.
Kind of go off that, if you don't mind, how did they hear the word, their testimony, if you remember?
A lot of them, well, here's the thing about the teenagers in the church. A lot of them probably weren't, I don't know, I can't really say for sure, but probably some of them at least weren't genuine Christians. Because a lot of them were sharing their testimonies with me. And I mean, I don't want to judge whether or not their testimony is true or not. I'm not, but a lot of them, some of their testimonies weren't, there wasn't a point where they actually, asked for forgiveness and asked. So, I don't know, it's hard for me to answer that question. Any other questions? All right, well, I'll be here later if you have any other questions for me.
Well, just as a follow-up on that, I think one thing Clayton said, I'd like to hear some of the men share. Is it easy being a Christian in America? How would you answer that question? I'd like to hear some of the men answer that question. What do you think? Is it easy to be a Christian in America? Yes or no? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Yes, sir.
I think it depends on how you define Christian. If you mean somebody who goes to church, it's a piece of cake.
It's easy to act as a Christian.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but to be a disciple of Christ, I think it's in a lot of ways harder in a culture that's supportive of going to church, but not necessarily acting the way the Bible says that Christians ought to act. It can be hard in a way because you're almost dragged down by the people on your own side, so to speak.
Right.
Whereas if in a culture where Christianity is opposed, it's a lot easier to distinguish.
I think that's a good point. We have it almost too easy here, I think, that you can, you're not challenged in your faith, whereas in a country where Christianity is not accepted as much, I think you have to make those tough choices. Who am I going to serve today? And so, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think it comes down to is Christianity a decision or a conversion? If it's a decision that you just kind of gotten fire insurance,
right? It's
different than, for instance, when we were in Zanzibar, our tour host was Muslim, but he said, I don't really care anything about it. It's just my parents are Muslim, so I'm Muslim.
Right.
He didn't really care anything about it. He claimed to be a Muslim. Just like there's many Christians that have maybe said a prayer and
right.
But a conversion, which I think was what the Bible calls us to do, is where you turn your back on everything and become a follower of Christ and follow what the Bible says. And, it is difficult doing that because even our fellow Christians, as Chris was saying, it's looked at differently.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Don't you think our society is moving more toward what Clayton described, though, where we're sort of being marginalized?
I think so.
And partly because of the commercialization of Christianity?
I think so.
We're quickly becoming what he described as happening there.
Right.
Where the people sort of just walk by and put their hand in front of their face and they go by the church,
Right.
Ignore us.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think it's a question that we need to think about, how we would answer that. There's no doubt about it. Anybody else have any thoughts? Any other testimonies or any other thoughts on that? I know we had talked about the men having the time to share. If any of the men came, you know, had something that God laid on their heart, now's the time to come share it. I know.
I'll just read one verse, and I don't know really where this.
Come on up here.
I'll just say it right here. But before we talk about whether being a Christian is easy or hard, but in Matthew 11:28 it says, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light."
So do you want to comment on that verse? I mean, what do you think?
I think it depends on what we mean by it when we say easy and hard and how we're looking at it. Because there are aspects that, in the way that others treat us, or whether or not we're standing up, because we definitely get resistance if we're standing for Christ. But I also don't think it's something that is hard to do in the sense that it's hard to be a Christian. If you're willing to believe on Christ, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and put your faith and trust in Him, then that aspect of it I don't think is hard.
Good thoughts, good thoughts. Anybody else? Anything they'd like to share? Yes, sir.
I think a lot of it's got to do with culture too. Like you mentioned, they're more of a laid back, not say not to plan, but they just a difference in their outlook on life. And then you compare the outlook on life or how we do things here. We're such a almost a driven society to succeed or to attain goals, that sort of thing. Right. And the technological aspect also. We probably have access to far more avenues of technology that they may not. And I think that comes into a big play.
Right.
The information age.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the thing that I thought of, even when Dean shared, talking about the culture, at least, Dean, you were mentioning, kind of Clayton did too, about they put higher importance on fellowshipping and discussing things. You said that the leaders would get together and they would discuss how can we make our community better. They're just a very a social culture. Would that be true? Pretty much. Whereas I think today we have the tendency to get behind our computer screen a little bit too much, probably. So those are some thoughts. Anybody else before we? Yes, sir.
Too, Jesus talked about when He came to give us abundant life. What's easy? Anything hard, it shouldn't matter what country we live in.
No, it's
Christ offers abundant life no matter where we are.
What does that mean, Mike? What is you read that verse, what does it mean that when we say abundant life? Does that mean everything's going to be easy, you're going to stay healthy, or you're going to have a lot of money? Does that what that means?
No, to me it means peace and purpose.
Peace and purpose, okay. Yeah, because I think the abundant life, everybody has a different take on what that means. And because you read that verse about the gate that, narrow is the gate, when you think of that means that, we're in the minority, so to speak. All right, any other...
In Philippians chapter 2, it says that, therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort or love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and one mind. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. And then he gives the great example of that. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation,
taking the form of a bondservant and becoming in the likeness of men, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore God also has highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name. So the thought came to me about this morning about how Jesus' heart was not wrapped up in the things that he had there with the Father, but his heart was upon what our situation was, and our situation was one of doom and judgment unless something was done, and he agreed to do something, and that was give himself. And he thought about others. His interest was in us. His interest was not in what he had. And I think that's the great difficulty that we as Christians have, and that is not been so wrapped up in our own interests to the detriment of those around us. And that's one of the hard things about Christian life, is am I wrapped up in my own stuff and building my own stuff, taking care of my own stuff, and enjoying my own stuff, or is my heart wrapped up in the interest of others? And in 2 Timothy 3, verse 10, Paul says, "You have carefully followed my doctrine, my manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance, persecutions, afflictions, which happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, at Lystra, what persecutions I endured, and out of them all the Lord delivered me." So Paul gives himself as an example of not being wrapped up in his own stuff. He's interested in the benefit of those that he ministered to. And it boils down to, he summarizes and says, yes, and all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. And, you know, I think where we fail in this country, I believe if you live godly the way you and I, if we live godly the way Paul lived godly, and interested in the welfare of others, interested in the gospel, then it wouldn't be easy for us. We have it easy because we know how far to take it without getting cut. Okay? We know how far to go without somebody pushing us. We know how far to go without somebody saying something. Now we're nice people. We don't smoke, drink, cuss, or chew, or run with those that do. But we don't make the difference. If we made a difference, the way we ought to make a difference, there'd be a lot more being said about adultery and fornication and abortion and homosexuality, homosexual marriage, and all this other stuff and nonsense that's going on in this country. If we declared the truth the way the Apostle Paul declared the truth, and that's what makes life different. That's what makes it hard. All right, thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Can I say something? This is going to be easier if you can finish this out, Greg. I appreciate what you were saying there, and actually all the comments. Most of you know that Teresa and I had a couple of weeks away, which is why my head's easier to put sunscreen on like this than other ways. But Clayton, you said something, your first takeaway I thought was really neat about time away from technology. And you woke up in the morning and grabbed your Bible and not your cell phone. And aren't we all guilty of those kinds of things? Let me just share with you two people that Teresa and I guess really that I've met Teresa met one of them that I think go right along with what has been said this morning. The first one was actually the Saturday morning after we first got to Hawaii, and you never know who you're going to meet different places, but when you're on a time zone that is 5 hours, I guess, ahead of wherever you are, you end up waking up really, really early in the morning. And so it was about 4:30 or so in the morning. I got up, and it was on the Saturday morning, again, right after we left, and I went down to the weight room at the hotel, and I was just kind of working out. Here comes another guy in there about the same time as me. Lots and lots of tattoos. A pretty rough-looking guy from that perspective. You can tell he was probably a construction worker kind of guy. As we talked for a while during our workouts, though, one of the things that always gets me is, hey, where are you from kind of a question, right? Lee always leads into something fun, interesting to learn. But Clayton, here's what hit me about this guy is, so it turns out he's a pipe fitter, lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're talking about being up early, being in the weight room early. He says, well, normally I get up early anyway. And here's what he said his schedule was. He says, I've got to be at work by 7, but normally I get up at 3:30 in the morning. And then he says, this goes on with what you were saying, Steve, he says, but because I'm a Christian, I need to spend time studying the Word every day. And that was just like right out of the blue. So he gets up at 3:30, spends an hour or so in the Word, and then he goes to the gym, and then he goes to work. I thought, wow, what if our schedule was the same way? Wouldn't that flip it all over in his head to get up 2.5, 3 hours early every day so you could first of all spend that hour in the Word before you go and do everything else? As it turned out, talking to this guy, his church in the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area is very similar to ours in almost every aspect. And then, make it even further, 30 years ago, he and his new wife at the time went down to Brazil and spent 20 years down there as missionaries, really that went without support, without known support. They prayed about it, knew God was leading them to do that. They went down there. They met up with various missionaries. They go to different churches and those kind of things. Hearing his story was very, very inspiring. But hearing his story about the church he's a part of and how it applied to us almost identically was such an encouragement. From this guy, and the guy never saw him again. So, I don't know anything else around that. But it was really neat for me to hear what you were saying there, Clayton, about what the schedule of the day should be and the encouragement to spend the time in the Word. Now, the second thing that I wanted to play upon was talk about that big tent, drawing attention to yourselves on the beach. And then talking about, is it Rance? Who's the guy that did the artist? Nash, thank you. So Nash, here he is doing his God-given talent in drawing people and letting that be his way of ministry. Well, here we are in Waikiki Beach, and there are people everywhere. There's all kinds of places to go spend money. And on the corner, every night, this guy's out there. He's a spray paint artist. Anybody ever seen a spray paint artist? If you've been to San Francisco, they're all over the place. And here he is, Waikiki Beach area on a corner, and Teresa and I walked up as he's about halfway through with his art drawing. What he does is he has music blaring under a big tent kind of a thing, drawing attention as well, and he's got spray paints, he's got a big mask on, and he's putting tape different places and spraying here and there, and it's almost like when you use all those colors, you crayon over everything, and then you come back, you start highlighting, you get your little knife or whatever, and you pull off the stuff that you don't want. So at the end of it, he starts pulling away the pieces of tape or the bottle cap or the different things, and the beautiful painting just appears before your eyes. Absolutely amazing, the talent that this guy has. But he ends up at the end of this, and he uses the I Can Only Imagine song to do that. And as he finishes his thing, he shares the gospel right there in front of all these people that have gathered to watch this spray paint artist do his thing. So fortunately our hotel was right close by, so I had a chance to go back a couple of times and talk to him and some of the folks that were helping him. Volunteers now from other churches coming and helping this man who has given his entire life, his gutters to glory conversion, Greg, that gutters to glory conversion And he's giving all of it back to God now, and every night that's what he does. Depends on the Lord to sell these paintings, but his main thing is to share the gospel through the talents that he's been given. And when you said that this morning about what Nash did and about the putting up of tents, what hit me pretty